begin this afternoon's hearing, I will hand Deputy Assistant Secretary McCurk an envelope and ask that he please deliver it to Secretary Kerry. These are my previous letters to Secretary Kerry pleading for the United States to help the residents of Camps Ashraf and Liberty and to prevent another deadly attack like the one from September at Camp Ashraf, which left 52 dead and 7 hostages who are still missing. Also, a video taken by the residents of Ashraf during the latest assault that I urge Secretary Kerry and all members of this subcommittee to view. 2 years ago next month, the United States withdrew our last troops from Iraq, and the American mission in Iraq formally ended. Yet shortly after our last soldier left, President Obama addressed troops at Fort Bragg and said, quote, "We're leaving behind a sovereign, stable, and self-reliant Iraq," end quote. However, what we have seen over the past 2 years, and it has been even more pronounced in the past few months, is that Iraq is far from stable, and it is only getting worse. And with the United States no longer there to act as a deterrent, Iran has quickly moved in to fill the void that we left behind. This is a very serious cause for concern and a real threat to U.S. national security interests to the region. Maliki and his government have done little to prevent or stop Iranian arms supplies from being flown over Iraq to Assad and his murderous forces in Syria. I've repeatedly urged the administration to press Maliki to be more proactive in stopping these flights that carry military personnel, arms, and equipment to Assad, yet the flights continue. Another example of Iran's influence in Iraq is the continued attacks against the people of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty, who, despite being guaranteed safety and security from the government of Iraq and the United Nations, have faced several deadly attacks against their compounds this year, while agents of Tehran attack their camps without repercussions and without Maliki making any effort to stop the violence. The U.S. must press Maliki and the UN to live up to their obligations under the December 2011 Memo of Understanding and protect the residents of these camps. The U.S. must not commit to increased security assistance until Maliki and the Iraqi government show that they are serious about combating the terrorist threat, will provide security to the Camp Ashraf and Liberty residents, and are willing to implement the reforms needed in Iraq to bring democracy and stability while also securing U.S. national security interests.
Iraq can play a critical role in resolving the conflict in Syria, stopping the spread of extremism, preventing nuclear Iran, and encouraging new regional partnerships. Furthermore, by virtue of its geography and history, but I'm troubled by Prime Minister Maliki's neutrality in the Syrian conflict. I'm worried that Iraq is increasingly susceptible to Iranian influence. Earlier this spring, many of my colleagues joined me in sending a letter to Secretary Kerry that expressed our serious concerns that Iranian flights were continuing to use Iraqi airspace to transport weapons to Assad's forces in Syria.
Mr. Rohrabacher is recognized.
Thank you very much. Madam Chairman, Iraq is now an ally of the Iranian mullah dictatorship. The Maliki Iraq regime is at best an accomplice to the murders of unarmed refugees at Camp Ashraf. These ingrates should not receive one penny, not one red cent of American aid.
Mr. McCurk, thank you for your testimony, and you testified in your written statement that it is legitimate to question Iraq's independence given Iran's ongoing use of Iraqi airspace to resupply the Assad regime. Why is Iraq not doing more to stop the overflights to Assad? Is the Maliki government trying to use this issue as a means to try to coerce the U.S. into providing Maliki more arms and advanced weapon systems? Also, you testified in your statement that the State Department is watchful of Iranian efforts to use Iraq in order to circumvent international sanctions. To what extent has Iraq been successful in that? There are reports that suggest that there are members of the Maliki government who are allowing some Iraqis to cross into Syria to join the fight. Why is the Iraqi government unwilling to stop these extremists from joining ranks with those fighting in Syria? And does the Maliki government's refusal to denounce Assad show that his ties with Iran run deep and that he does not want to upset the regime in Tehran? And lastly, at the start of the hearing, I handed you an envelope filled with letters and a video. Also, the plight of the residents of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty has been tragic, but the situation is getting worse.
Hey, this is an issue that I am tracking every single day. On the tragic attack on September 1st, I went to Iraq shortly thereafter. We worked very hard to get the remaining survivors off of Camp Ashraf where they were not safe. I visited the residents and the survivors at Camp Liberty. We are determined to keep them as safe as possible.
And the T-walls,
do you think
that we can do more?
Yes, thank you. I just spoke with Ambassador Beecroft this morning. The numbers, there's about 1,400 large T-walls now. We want to get as many T-walls in as possible. Some of this comes down to logistics. Some of it comes down to getting the right contractor. Some of it comes down to getting the right meeting in place for where the T-walls go. But there's no excuse. The T-walls need to move into the camp.
Thank you. And on Iran's influence in Iraq and Syria.
We have influence in Baghdad. Other states in the region have tremendous influence in Baghdad. The issue of overflights, Madam Chairman, I'd really welcome the opportunity to come and brief you in a classified setting.
Time is up, but we will do that, sir. Thank you. Mr. Wilson is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. As I mentioned, I'm very, very grateful that I've had two sons serve in Iraq, Army, Navy. The American people have shed blood on behalf of the people of Iraq, and we want success and hope for success. Additionally, I've had the opportunity to visit the country 11 times. I've been very impressed by the people I've met. And again, hopeful for the country. But a real tragedy has been the murders at Camp Ashraf. Since December 2008, before our government turned over the protection of the camp to the Iraqi government, Prime Minister Maliki has repeatedly assured the world that it would treat the residents humanely and protect them from harm. Yet it has not kept the promise. As 111 residents have been murdered in cold blood, and more than 1,000 wounded in 5 attacks, including the September 1st massacre. What is the United States doing to prevent further attacks and greater loss of life in terms of ensuring the safety and security of the residents?
The State Department, the Secretary, has appointed a colleague of mine, Jonathan Weiner, to work this issue full-time to find a place for them to go. It is an urgent humanitarian issue, an international humanitarian crisis. And I went to the camp to meet with the survivors, to speak with the families. And I promised them to do everything I possibly could to get them to safety.
Well, I appreciate your commitment to that. After the September 1st massacre, the State Department called for an independent investigation by the United Nations. 74 days on, nothing's been done, let alone an independent investigation. Could you tell this committee whether any independent probe has been carried out or not? If so, by whom, and what is the finding? If not, why not? 5 attacks have been launched against the residents and not one person has been arrested. What do we do to maintain promises of protection?
Congressman, shortly after the attack, we worked with the United Nations to make sure that they got a team up to Camp Ashraf within 24 hours of the attack to document exactly what happened, because there was a lot of stories about what happened. They went there, took photographs of the bodies to make sure that it was documented as to how these people were killed, and there's no question about it. We have looked very closely at all of our information. I know I've had the opportunity to brief some members of the subcommittee in a classified setting, which I would be pleased to do again to update you on the information that we have. We did call for an investigation and for the UN to be involved in this process. The UN was also involved in making sure that the survivors got out of Camp Ashraf and out of harm's way to Camp Liberty.
And I've been to Camp Liberty many times, but I obviously am concerned. I appreciate your commitment, and indeed, every effort should be made to protect those citizens. Thank you.
I want to thank the chair and ranking member for the opportunity to participate in this hearing. Maliki wants our weapons, yet he allows planes to go from Iran to Syria, taking murderers and thugs and the IRGC and weapons with them. He says that he can't defend his own airspace, but he certainly has not invited Turkey, Saudi Arabia, or the United States to defend that airspace from these murderers that fly leisurely across Iraq and do their killing in Syria. Now I'd like to join with Mr. Wilson and others in focusing on Camp Liberty. You had 101 members of the MEK there. 52 were killed. That's a 50% casualty rate, roughly, or roughly 1 million times the casualty rate that ordinary Iraqi civilians have faced in the unfortunate deaths that have occurred in Iraq. Included among those who died was the brother of Asaf al-Nia, who I believe is in our audience today. The State Department has issued a statement saying, well, the Iraqi government had nothing to do with it, which to me is an incredible indictment. They have an obligation to protect the residents of the camp, and according to our own State Department, did nothing. In fact, the assailants had to get past several checkpoints in order to carry out their murders. When we were at Camp Liberty, or when we were in Iraq, Camp Liberty had 17,000 of these T-walls that protect those who live in the camp from missiles and mortars. Now there are less than 200. What have we done to make it clear to Maliki that he has to put back the T-walls and provide the defense, or will he keep the people there subject to attack?
I was just at the camp about a month or so ago, or a couple months ago, and saw it with my own eyes, and I want to get more T-walls into the camp. And I spoke with Ambassador Beecroft about this just today, and there's an agreement with the Iraqi government we have to get the right meeting in place, the right people there for where the T-walls are going to go, and I think we'll see more T-walls moving into the camp. But we're continuing to work it as hard as we can.
Well, we have fewer than 200. We need 17,500. I yield back. Thank you.